Oh, good. Finally. Alrighty. Let me see. Okay. I think I'm like, okay, there we go. I don't know if the microphone's loud enough. Let me see something right quick. That don't look very loud on the microphone. So let me see. That looks kind of, I don't know. I haven't done this in a while. So I don't have anyone joining the chat yet. So while I'm doing this, let me see something. I'm gonna try to adjust the microphone volume while I'm at it because I don't think it's loud enough. Back sound microphone volume that looks kind of low. But let me see. Yeah, that looks kind of low. Can I adjust that? Uh, wow, that looks kind of low. Test 1 2 2 2. No, that's low. I'll try to adjust this volume. Um, that's not a Behringer. Oh, you're talking about the right here, the Behringer here. That's a controller. That's just a MIDI controller. It's called the Behringer Motor 49. Welcome, Mr. Smooth. I'm trying to get this volume. I don't know if you hear me or I don't. This look like it may be barely low. I'm trying to make an adjustment. So yeah, I haven't went live in a while, so I'm trying to get this before I start. I know it's been 2.5 minutes, but I'm trying to get this volume um, set. So the microphone on the webcam is a little louder. It was picking up pretty loud when I did the video, but it seemed like it's not very loud. Can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me really good or not. I'm I'm trying to make it louder. Okay, I do sound loud and clear. Okay, all right, appreciate. I couldn't tell because the little dots look like I'm low. Okay. I wanted to do a live stream because I haven't done one in a while. So some people might catch me, some people probably won't. I just want to talk about anything audio. So, and I'm just gonna ask if since you're the first one here, Mister. Uh, okay, yes, volume's good. Yes, good volume. Okay, if you got any questions, you feel free to ask. Now I'm just gonna talk about audio and recording or anything that you might have a question on. Um, but what I want to do is I want to talk about audio and why I made the video on, for example, audio uh, school. And the reason I was making that video, I had to think about it, was that I really want to stress that I would never tell anyone it's not a thing to not go to school, but for the price, it kind of goes back to what I was making my other videos about the SSL and API and all this, where the price is so high it doesn't justify the need anymore. So, and I want to talk a little bit about the history of recording for a quick second. Um, uh, oh, well, let me answer your question. You said, I know that you have talked about patch bays before, but is it the same as send and inserts on a mixer, and how it's set up? Okay, let's talk about patch bays for a second. Patch bays are basically input and output routing for cables, right? That's really all they are. But a patch bay, what makes a patch bay unique is some patch bays are fixed a certain way, and other patch bays are adjustable. So basically, if you don't insert anything into a patch bay, the top row, which are considered outs, are automatically routed to the bottom row. They're interconnected inside. You can't see it, but they are. So if you don't plug anything to your patch bay, the tops are going to automatically route to the bottom. What makes the patch bay unique is when you stick a cable into one of the in on the outs or the in, front or back, usually from the front. They say in school when they teach you patch bays is this: think of a patch bay. When you're looking at a patch bay, you're actually supposed to be kind of visualizing that you're looking at the back of gear, input and output of gear. Except, if you look at a piece of rack gear, the inputs and outputs are usually side by side. Well, on a patch bay, they're one over top, the out, the in. So it's supposed to be like out in. So that's how you're supposed to think of it. But whenever you set something out, it's the top is automatically going to connect to the bottom until you stick a cable into the front of it. And then instead of it really being automatically connected to the top, it's going to route through where that cable is going to automatically take it from internal to that cable. And you take that cable and you send it to where you want it to go. In other words, you plug into the top, then you might want to send it to a compressor or an EQ or anything like that. And then you have to take the output, because all your gear is actually physically connected, including the mixer, the sends, the bus, anything with a send and return, direct out, any inputs and outputs on the back of your console, as well as your outboard gear, are supposed to be connected to your patch bay. And it just allows you to connect everything to the mixer without physically connecting stuff to the mixer. You use the patch bay instead of connecting directly to the mixer, if that makes sense. A lot of times you don't need the patch bay if you only got a couple pieces of outboard gear, and you know that you're going to leave that gear connected all the time, or you don't mind every now and then get behind the console if it's accessible. Plug it into you don't need a patch bay. But if you're someone like me who has and you're going to see this in most of your typical commercial studios where they have a lot of outboard gear. They're going to have a console with a lot of direct outs, a lot of bus channels, a lot of sends and returns. The patch bay is so much easier to just, instead of climbing behind the gear or climbing behind the racks, you just plug into the patch bay. But there are typically 3 or 4 different configurations to set your patch bay. The one is called normal, the other one's called half normal, then there's called through, and then there's parallel. Normally, normal means that when you plug something up, and the best way for this is if you were going to run from a live room. Let's say you had a live room, and all your musicians are going to record into your live room. Well, you would run a patch panel. So if you ever seen videos of a recording studio and they go into the live room, look on the wall. Pay attention to that wall, or somewhere on the wall, you'll see a bunch of XLR or 1/4-inch jacks. Well, those jacks are wired to come from that live room into the top row of a patch bay somewhere in the control room. The patch bay, because it's internally wired inside the patch bay, from the bottom row, is then going to send outputs. They're going to come out into the input of your console. So if your console has 24 or 48 channels or whatever, you would see 24, 48 channels of going into the console. Now, your big expensive consoles like SSL, Neve, APIs, they're not going to have the TRS or the XLR. They're going to have D sub connectors. So And those D-sub connectors are hardwired to the patch bay, because usually the patch bay is hardwired. They solder the wires, because commercial studios are pretty much permanent. They're not moving anywhere, or they're going to be there for years. So that's why they hardwired, and they do that to make sure that there's not going to have any problems or with cable breakage or anything like that. So they use a really expensive, high quality wire, and they solder this wire. And they also run a ground wire from the patch bay to a central ground point, which is called a star ground system. They run a grounding system to that. But so that way you don't have any of these noises, like the little hums and buzzes that you get from ground loops. But that's what the patch bay is for. Think of it now. Half normal means that normally when it's normal, that means anywhere you put a piece of cable, if it's normal, a patch bay that's set for normal, any cable that you put into a patch bay, the top or the bottom row, is going to break the signal, and the signal is going to go to that cable instead of going internally to the way the patch bay is wired. But a half normal means that normally if you put a cable on the top, it's not going to affect the bottom output until you stick something in the bottom rows. That's half normal. And some people say, well, what's the difference between running a half normal versus a normal patch bay? Well, you only want to run half normal if you don't want to interrupt something. In other words, let's say you want to try out a compressor, but you had the signal coming from your live room into the mixer, or you were running from your audio interface back into the mixer, and you don't want to interrupt the sound that you recorded into your DAW or from a tape. DAWs replace tape. If you don't want to interrupt that sound, then you're going to actually run a cable from the bottom to let you would run it out into the unit that you want to listen to. You're not going to hear anything from the unit until you run the output from the unit, from the patch bay, back into the bottom. Then you'll hear the compressor or an EQ or a reverb or whatever start working. But if you run it at a normal, the minute that you stick a cable into the out of the top row, the signal is going to stop. You're going to break the signal. That's called breaking the normal. The signal is going to stop. You're not going to hear anything until you continue the signal flow to the unit you want to patch to. That's the difference. So basically, a half normal means that it allows you to continue to hear the signal, even if you got all your sounds going through your console. The half normal means that if you take something and you run a couple of cables on the out to go into a piece of gear, the signal's not going to stop. It's not going to be interrupted. But the minute you run the output of that piece of gear into the bottom row, then you'll start to hear the gear. In a normal configuration, the minute you pick a cable into the patch bay, the signal's going to stop. You're not going to hear anything until you continue the signal. That's the only difference. Now, a lot of times people want to use normal for if you just want to put a patch bay in the middle of your signal flow. That's the only time. That's the best practices for normal or half normal. But if you're going to use gear, like, for example, outboard gear, compressors, reverbs, EQs, or whatever, then you want to run those patch bays where they're the outs and ends. The top row is not connected to the bottom. So you want to make sure you get a patch bay that you can set to through or parallel so that the top's outputs do not touch the bottom. They're not interconnected. That way you won't create a signal loop. So if you take your console, so normally a patch bay would be like this. This is in a commercial studio, this is what they're going to do. Their top row, for the most part, is going to be their live room. And that's going to continue for the live room from the top. The bottom row is going to go into the console. And then they'll have another row will come out of the console to go into your audio interface. And then the outputs of your interface would then come back into another patch bay. And that would then go back into another patch bay that would then go back into a monitoring section of a console. Then they would have other patch bays that would be set to through for outboard gear, such as compressors. And those will all be set to through. And you'll see like a row of compressors, EQs, delays, reverbs, and then I have another row for all sends. So you have your sends top and your returns bottom. Okay, so it says, why pay for audio engineering school when we have people like you everywhere? Fantastic, explain. Oh, thanks. See, that was the reason why I made the video yesterday. It's like, why are you spending $100,000 when even the top mixing engineers or people like myself have videos like this explaining this on the internet? I don't understand that concept either. Now, I think here's the thing. Now, most people are going to they're going to do a home recording studio for two reasons. They do the home studio for themselves because they want to create their own music and they want to just produce and record and do their own stuff. And they're just going to upload their stuff to YouTube, or they're going to upload their stuff to Reverb Nation or SoundCloud. Other people want to do a home recording studio, but yet still make money to record other people, right? So if you are spending $100,000, why do I need to pay someone $100,000? If you really, technically, if you think about it, let's look at all the top commercial studios out there. Sunset Sound, United, East West, Electric Lady, all Nashville, Blackbird, or whatever. It doesn't matter. All you got to do is really examine their control room, and examine their live room. And one of the things they're all going to have unique is the live room are usually tall ceilings, and they'll have some sort of acoustic panels in there. They're going to have bass traps, acoustic panels, diffusers, anything that the same common sense. There's a video that you can watch on acoustic panels to set up your own in a bedroom. The thing is, you're just in a live room to record a band. You're just doing it on a bigger scale. But an audio engineering school wants you to pay $100,000 to know that, when I just said that in 5 minutes. That's the difference between the live room and the commercial studio, and you're trying to set up a live room in your house to record a band. Also, audio engineering schools, the problem that I see with audio engineering schools is that they think everyone are going to be one or two genre specific. Rock bands, country bands, or bands in general. EDM music or electronic music, which is virtual sounds, Contact, Novation, VIP. There's thousands of them. I have Synthology, Synth Anthology by UVI, Analog Lab 5 that came with my Arturia, MIDI controllers. All those sounds are digital sounds. All I got to do is make sure I'm getting the right mix and I've had to use some processing on those sounds, but that's all direct sounds. I don't need a live room for that. The only time I need a live room is if I'm going to record acoustics, like acoustic guitar, vocals, bass, or whatever. And even that can be manipulated in a bedroom. For me, in my house, I have tall ceilings, so I can use some of the tall ceilings and the reflections in the tall ceilings to get an ambience when it's only really purposeful if you're going to use anything that requires a microphone. Let me catch some other questions. So that's the reason why I figured all that stuff you can learn. That's why I stress stuff like videos like the art of mixing, because he goes in extreme details about EQ, compression, delays, stuff like that. If you know those basics, they apply no matter what genre. But other than that, you use that kind of information to your benefit. So let me read the next question. What is your favorite DAW? Do you prefer? What's your favorite DAW? Do you prefer using a DAW? I started using DAWs in 1994 when it was the old one with Cakewalk 3.0. So I love DAWs because it got me off the sequence off a keyboard, because I knew I could do more. And this is before DAWs could do audio and plugins. But I like the point that a DAW has way more editing capability than you could ever do with tape or on a keyboard. I don't use sequencers on keyboards anymore because I need 50 tracks or whatever. Now, as far as my favorite DAW, I like a lot of them. I have a lot of them. My go-to is Cakewalk because it's what I started on. But I like Studio One. I think FL Studio is off the chain. I like Reasons because all the virtual instruments, the Reasons have improved. I like Harrison Mix Bus. I like Cubase. I like them all. I don't really have a favorite DAW because I think every DAW has its ups and downs, and I try to use what DAW, I even like MPC Beats and MPC, because I have an MPC studio. So that's, you can do, I like manipulating sounds there. So it just depends on what I'm doing. But yeah, I like them all. I'm not one DAW specific. I try to learn them all because, and I'll give you one more thing before I answer more questions. The reason why I try to learn all these DAWs because I might have people or clients or people come to my studio and they might be familiar with FL Studio, or they might work with Cubase, or they might work Reasons, or they might work with Studio One, or even Pro Tools. They might work with those DAWs. I want to be proficient because as long as you can mix in any of those DAWs, you're going to get the same output, So that's the reason why. So, all right. So let me see the next question. He's a preach. Okay. There's nothing guaranteed that in the line of education as well. I have tons of buddies who spent that kind of money and they still ask me questions, and I didn't go to school. I'm just new to patches. Okay. And I agree. Because you think about it, any school is kind of like a person that go to med school. They're still going to start off as an intern at a hospital or whatever. They're not going to be a surgeon, or they're not going to be. It's like you think about it, and if you really think about this when it comes to audio engineering school, really think about this. You go to Capital Studios. You go to Capital Studios, or you go to United or East West, anywhere that they have a client like Jay-Z, Justin Timberlake, Katy Perry, Mariah Carey, Mary J. Blige, the list goes on, of clients that are paying hundreds of $1,000s. Do you honestly think they're going to take the chance of someone who may have used an 1176 or an LA2 once or twice? They might have placed, especially if a lot of these rock bands, or if it's a real prominent band, let's say AC/DC, they've been around for 40 years. Let's say they're going to cut a new album. You think they're going to really let you mic and you don't have any experience? No, they're going to like, hey, while you at it, you can watch what we're doing. Go grab me another Dr. Pepper. And you just have to, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I learned how to work on an SSL in school. Yeah, but they're going to be like, well, this SSL 6000, whatever, the way, because SSLs, they can set them totally different, or whatever the case may be, or it's just a lot more to it than what you thought from school. And they're going to like, well, we need this, and this done. And if you can't answer those questions, they're not going to let you touch $100,000 client. They're not. So this is about money in the end. These studios can't afford to have someone with no experience working on a $100,000 client. That's probably, you slowly build your experience. And as you slowly build your experience, you start as an intern. You might move to an assistant where you can plug in a couple of patches, turn a couple of knobs for the engineer. You do that over time if you get to that point, because 60% of people that went to Ivy school get frustrated. They go, because they know what they know, they go start their own studios and they generate their own clients, and they learn on that way. So I might have to sneeze. So forgive me if I have to sneeze because my nose feels like I got to sneeze. Says, I still can't decide what's more important to upgrade, is the microphone or the preamps. Believe it or not, I made a video on this. Preamps are emphasized because it's assumed that you already know what you're doing when it comes to these. You see about people always endorsing preamps. But preamps, really, overall, preamp is really designed to amplify. Some just add a little bit of warmth and color over others. Some are very transparent. Some are just plain. Most audio interface preamps are clear. But if you really think about it, this is the mistake I've seen people make. They'll upgrade the preamp because they'll record a vocalist on the instrument. It didn't sound right. Well, maybe it's the preamp. When in actuality, the microphone was the problem. The microphone didn't fit. So I would tell anyone, look at your microphones first. and you want to have at least 2 or 3 different types of condensers, at least two or three types of dynamics. One quick story on this: Bruce Sweeting, who recorded Michael Jackson's vocals for Thriller, had different types of. He had 47s, 67s, all the classic go-to microphones we can't afford on Michael Jackson vocals, and he didn't like any of them. He decided to try a Shure SM7. Now they got this SM7B, the Shure SM7. That's what you hear on the album. So sometimes it's not the preamps. A lot of times it's the microphone. Now you have a good collection of microphones, you're still not getting a good sound. Then you start looking at the preamps. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you a history of the preamps and why preamps are why they came to be later on, if I remember. I'm going to try to get to another question. But I'm going to try to come back to the preamps and why people stress that and why preamps became such a big deal. So it says, I have my studio set up with a lot of gear, but it stays in place. That, like me, of course, obviously, you can see this stuff is not going anywhere. But I do have, I bought that when I did my studio tour. I do have a little small setup with a laptop, a little Toria keyboard, and you could take some headphones and you could travel with that because all the DAW plugins are in it. But the way I like to work, I need to use my smaller setup in my other room or up here because I have a way more variety of tools. So that's the reason why I don't plan on moving. L. Summers says, for most people will say preamps are most important. I think it's in this day and age with Midas preamps, Focusrite, SSL, and all that affordable now. I would say invest in a decent mic. Exactly. I would look at microphones because that's what's hearing first is the microphone. It's the first in the signal chain. But even if you had great microphones, but if the person comes in there and they got a cheesy, broke down $50 guitar with bad strings, that ain't gonna help. The microphone or preamp is not gonna help that. So the source starts with a good source, meaning a good rapper, a good singer, and of course a good musician is going to invest in good gear. That's just a no-brainer. A good vocalist, they know how to use their voice to sing and express. So the microphone and where it's placed, because if you pick a microphone, the closer you move the microphone, the more it's going to sound approximately. So the more warmth and all that's why you want to have the filtered or the reduced explosives like P's and B's and all that kind of stuff. But the microphone, and believe it or not, you might have a Newman U87 may sound great on one person, but it might not sound great on another person. You could put, and I used when Luther Vandross was alive. If you listen to the timbre and the tonation of Luther Vandross compared to the tonation of like Stevie Wonder, well, Stevie Wonder has a little bit higher register, more tinny-ish vocals. So you might not want to use a U87 on here. You might want to use a 47 or, even a Rode NT1 might even sound a lot better on Stevie Wonder than like a Newman 87 as an example. So that you might want to look at that. And of course, Mr. I think they're equally important. You can save up and buy at the time. Yeah, you can. They're both matters, but it also matters on how the engineer sets it, because one little key thing, such as not setting the pad or the roll off 80, high pass filter of 80 hertz, the drop off, you're going to get low end rumbles, explosives, because some singers like to move and you can hear their feet rumbling and all that. So you have to set that up. The mic you want to make sure you're not going to clip it. And then of course, there are some preamps that come with EQs and compressors in them. You want to make sure you're setting that ratio right. The tag, make sure you're not using you're not overdoing it with the EQ. That's how the engineer is going to set it up. That's also crucial. Blaise Francis, forgive me if Blaise, I'm not trying to butcher your name, so I'm not trying to do that. It says, is it better to have an AD converter in front of your audio interface coming from the mixer or an external converter is not important when printing to your DAW. Let me read that one more time. Is it better to have an AD converter in front of your audio interface coming from the mixer, or external converter is not important? Well, you remember AD converter and your audio interface. Well, the audio interface is an AD converter. It's just that the difference between an AD converter and an audio interface would be that an AD to DA converter is just what it is. It just converts audio to digital. An audio interface is usually going to come with preamps, maybe some headphone section, some headphone input, some extra stuff for you to hear the audio. But now, in best practices, if you have a mixing console, in best practices, you want to use the mixing console as your monitoring source and your return for when you record from your DAW. So usually you're going to run sources into your mixer, then that's going to go into your AD to converter. Then that's which is going to go to your DAW, your computer. Then from your DAW, when your output setup from your DAW is going to come out of the converter back to the mixer. And a lot of times, if you have a lot of gear, there's a patch bay in play to insert gear. That's usually the best way practices, because the mixer is going to help color the sound going in, and it's going to help color the sound coming out. It has benefits. There are a lot of people who don't believe in needing a mixer, which you don't. I believe a mixer helps, but that's just my opinion. So I said I hook up my mic. To hook my mic up, do I put it in a DI or line? Well, it depends on the mic. Now, if it's a dynamic mic, it doesn't require phantom power. The thing is, what I've noticed with a lot of these interfaces, a lot of times you have to put a lot of gain. Now, some people use a cloud lifter or something to that sort on their dynamic mic to give it more gain to go into the and some people can use a DI box or something like that. Line level versus mic level on anything is mic levels are really low level signals. Line levels are usually recording level signals, especially if it's set to 4 +4 versus -10. But I would say on your microphone, if it's a condenser mic, you're definitely going to run mic, and you're definitely going to use a phantom power of 48 volts, and you're going to run it through the mic input. So you're not going to be able to even run it through a line input. You have to run it through a mic input for a condenser mic. That's just the way they're set up. It says on my audio interface. Now, your audio interface, like I said, you want to run your microphone through the XLR input, whether it's a dynamic or a condenser or a ribbon. Except dynamics and ribbons do not require phantom power. Only condenser mics do. Some ribbons require phantom power, but it's very, very rare. On your interface, you want to run it through the mic input and hit the phantom power, and then, of course, you adjust your gain. You should see levels in your input if you set up the input in your DAW and set it to receive your audio interface for that channel. If you don't, you would definitely want to check your audio interface and make sure you got your drivers and all that stuff set up. On Digi Design, usually Digi Designs, they were AD to DA converters, and you had to use external preamps. But it depends on the model. I'm not really too familiar with Digi Design, because Digi Design is more Avid Pro Tools setup. So let's see. Christina said, "Where's your studio at?" Well, I'm located in Tennessee. That's where I'm at. I'm in Tennessee. I'm about 45 minutes north of Nashville. Miss Smith said, "Do not put in the DI, please." And like I said, most microphones you want to, on your audio interface, you want to connect to the XLR on your interface. And if it's, like I said, if it's a dynamic, you don't use the phantom power, but you want to connect to the mic input. DI or lines are usually for instruments, or for like, especially high Z inputs, are usually for like guitars, bass. stuff like that. Keyboards, because they have amplifiers in them with a volume control, you can just run that direct in, line in. Now, let me see. They're questioning each other between each other. Okay. All right. So it says in your last video, you were talking about you do not need to go to audio school to learn to mix and master. You can learn by yourself, and I agree. But what are your benefits of getting a degree? Once again, and you'll hear this probably from a ton of people that made videos about, do you need audio engineering school? The degree in anything is only going to matter for stuff like law, like a lawyer or a doctor. Other than that, or if you're in the corporate world, they want to, if you're going to work for some sort of corporate, and you need to show your degree because, whatever the case. But in audio, when it comes to audio, you got a lot of people that's been in this business 20, 30, 40 years that don't have a degree. But their records speak for themselves because they've been mixing some of the top artists in the world. And if you think about a person that don't have a degree, they've mixed and engineered Rihanna, Justin Timberlake, Usher, Jay-Z, Drake, Lil Wayne, or we can go country, Trisha Yearwood, Martina McBride, Carrie Underwood. The list just goes on and on. They got a record like that. They're not even asking for a degree. They already know what these people can do because they've heard the records. So it's really more about what you know. It's like for me, if a person's like, well, I want to come to your studio, I'm going to ask you, what do you know? More than I'm not going to ask you about your degree. I'm going to ask you, what do you know? And you're like, well, I've only worked in this DAW with, and that can be like, it just really depends. So I'm kind of like, if you don't have an experience, if I bring a client in here, I'm not sure if I need to, because I can't take a chance of you not knowing what you're doing. Okay. Let me see. Next question. All right. What are your thoughts on sample rates? Will higher sample rates give higher quality? Yeah, sample rates definitely give higher quality because think of a sample rate like this. A sample rate is it's kind of like 30 frames per second when you're doing a film versus 60 frames per second. And a lot of times when we think of frame rate, we always think that the frame rate is, we can do 60 frames per second so we can slow down so you can see the slow motion. Well, sample rates is just capturing more details of the sound. The problem with sample rate is your computer's processing and buffering speed usually can't keep up. And that's what's going to cause problems. If you got a very, very powerful, let's say you have a Mac. Let's say you got the new Mac with the M1. Or you have a Mac with an Intel. It's got you got whatever, or you got 8 or 12 core processing, or even 16 core processing, 128 gigs of RAM. You probably are not going to have problems with running stuff at 96 or even 192K sampling rate. But the thing is, also when you listen to that higher sample rate, when you play something back, really, or the differences is not going to be so nominal in difference that people are hearing 192 sample rate versus if you just did 48. Is very, very minute. That's why for music today, the standard is still 44.1. And your movie sample rate needs to be at least 48. That's even today. Netflix and all these require that you record your music at least 48. That's the standard. You can record the 96, it will give you details, but most people's computers will not be able to process that much of a high sampling rate. That's just, really what it is. Okay. Okay. Alfredo asks, why do you choose an analog mixer than a digital mixer? I don't think digital mixers are bad. I like digital mixers. I think digital mixers are great. The only issue that I see with digital mixers when you're trying to use a lot of the outboard gear, and of course, with me having a lot of outboard gear, it's a lot of analog outboard gear. Digital mixers usually don't have the inputs, the direct outs, the auxiliary sends, the buff, and I'm talking about the actual connectivity. I'm not talking about setting up auxiliary sends internally through routing internally within a digital mixer. They usually don't have the actual physical connectivity for that. And most of the time on a digital mixer, you can get yourself lost trying to figure out which channel when you're selecting a channel, you go, let's say you have a digital mixer with 24 channels and you select channel 1, and now you can use your channel strip to adjust that. Then you got to go to channel 7 to make an adjustment, or you got to select the channel 2, then you get channel strip. But you're using one channel strip control to control every single channel, including the main master bus channel strip. That's the only thing that I don't like. Not saying that they're beneficial, because digital mixers, what's great about digital mixers is that for recalls, saving scenes, internal processing, they're great. But it's just my workflow of using an analog console and having physical connectivity to gear is a lot more intuitive with an analog console. One's not necessarily better than the other, was just because you can use a digital mixer like the Behringer X32, the Personas Live, the Yamaha TF5 or TF7, or the Allen & Heath QU16, or any of those digital mixers. Use their internal gates, compressors, reverbs, EQs, and do mixes and be great with just that internal processing. And you can incorporate that with plugins in the DAW and be perfectly happy, and it'll work. I just prefer to work the way I work because I'm a little bit more old school. My way of working is not better. It's something I'm complacent and consistent and used to. That's all. On a digital mixer. Troy says, I have a question. I just purchased a 276 universal audio interface. It comes with built-in preamp for the microphone, which I have a Neumann TLM. I mean, if you have a TLM 105, 103, those are good mics. It performs okay, but personally, I think it needs more. Well, once again, unless you buy the universal audio interface like the Apollo, where they have the Unison preamps in them, those are supposed to be an upgrade. It's kind of like not downing universal audio or anyone, but it's kind of like with, and I'll go back to Behringer as an example. Why I have a lot of Behringer gear? Because Behringer, and I'll use an example, not saying they're better. I'm just saying that Behringer used some, they said, okay, our preamps aren't working. Midas was a leading industry preamp maker and live console maker they're like up there with Allen & Heath and all the other live console mixers. So their preamps are like stellar. Well, brands, when they bought Midas, they said, well, we're just going to incorporate the Midas preamps. They're just better. And they started incorporating those Midas preamps in their interfaces and stuff like that. And that's what shot Behringer's. Behringer bought Tannoy and TC Electric and all these better companies, and their products sounded a lot better. So with Universal Audio, the deal is some of their interfaces like that 276, they may be giving you bare, transparent mic pre's, and that's the reason why a lot of people end up going with an external preamp. Something like, you don't necessarily have to break the bank to get a Neve or an API. You can get the clones like the Warm Audio Tone Beast, or the Warm Audio, or the Stanley, or a Heritage Audio, or a Ventec, or you can get a 500 series and get preamp, but those tend to have a little bit more warmth color, and that's usually what people are looking for, unless you really want to dish out some money and start getting like the really high-end preamps. I don't think you need to spend, like I said, I'm gonna try to come back to preamps later when I remember while I'm doing this live feed, but that might be why you just need some more. It's just it may be that they're it just don't have enough. Most of these the lower cost interfaces do not have enough in their preamp. So okay, let me see. I'll make sure I'm not skipping questions. Okay. Oh, okay. Mr. and AI are still conversing. And once again, L says preamps are overrated. Once again, I would say I don't necessarily think overrated. I think they're over. What's the word I'm looking for? They're overly emphasized, and they're not including the rest of everything that would be in the signal chain. It's like one part, yeah, preamps are important, but so is the microphone, so is the artist, so is the musician, so is the, and everything else in the equation. So is the compressor, so is the, EQ, so is the DAW, being knowledgeable in the DAW, being knowledgeable in the plugins and how they work. All of that matters. But I think the problem is because looking at preamps, whenever it's like anything in life, whenever you hear something and people talk about a lot, automatically everybody gravitate to it, not realize there's more equation to it. And I'm gonna use one analogy, and I'll jump to what I mean by this. I'm sure by now, I was military for a long while, for 20 plus years. The thing that us as people that are military is you see now Navy SEALs or Army Rangers or that extreme, and that is the military, believe it or not, or the Navy or the military can still win a war without any of those elements, period. But the problem with TV and media, the media makes you think Navy SEALs, right? Not understanding, you really think about it, the Navy never had a ground fighting force. And a lot of the stuff that Navy SEALs do, your typical airborne infantry units in the Army do. And it's like, well, Navy SEALs, they swim underwater. Well, the Navy SEALs aren't fighting the enemy underwater. They fighting them on land. And Navy, and I'm not downside Navy SEALs, because Navy SEALs, what they do is, but Navy SEALs, what they do is stellar. But the point is, you still have the people that fly the jets, people that fly the helicopters, you can't do anything without communications. You still need people to drive the ships. You still, in the Army, you still got artillery. We still got helicopters. We still got tanks. We still got infantry fighting forces. You still need medics. You still need people to make food. You still need truck drivers to deliver supplies. You need supply. You need communications. The whole Army as a whole is what wins wars, not just Army Rangers or Special Forces. So it's kind of like going back to bring that same analogy about with gear. It's kind of like, well, you can talk preamps, but it does no good if you don't have monitors. Your monitor's not placed in your studio to hear. The studio monitors are just as important as the preamp, if that makes sense. So and then Alfredo, okay, next Alfredo says, question, my next investment now is getting mastering hardware. Do you think I should I get affordable cheap hardware or save and get high quality unit? I made a video on, it was talking about buying cheaper gear with basically unrealistic expectations. Naturally, in anything, what you pay for is what you get. The thing is, you'll be surprised that sometimes there's a happy medium to that when you're trying to buy gear. And what I mean by that is this: Shadow Heels mastering compressor, right? Versus, let's say the Shadow Heels run you $3,500. Let's say Daking makes a mastering compressor. It runs $1,500. The thing is, if both of them, even though you pay less for the Daking, will the results be significant between the two? If the results are minimum at best between the two, then you're going to get great results with the Daking. So don't spend $3,500 because studios have Shadow Heels in their arsenal, or mastering studios have Shadow Heels, because you can get the same results with a Daking. Look at it like that. But at the same time, don't go too cheap where the quality and the build quality and the sound quality is going to suffer. So you have to, I don't know if that kind of answers your question. So, and he also said, settle or should I get a plug-in? Their plugins are doing some stellar stuff today. They just are. They're just, because the plugins are emulating real gear. What used to hurt plugins back in the day, especially in 32-bit systems, was that the computer just couldn't process the coding to get it to emulate like the real piece of gear. Now that we're at 64-bit, it's like then triple the processing power. That's why a plugin sounds so much more realistic and better quality, because the processing's better. So I would tell you, when it comes to that, I have a lot of plugins. I would look at plugins heavily. The key thing on recording is the front end, which is the recording portion of it, is the key factor when you start moving into the mixing and then to the mastering. The mastering is just the polishing. I like to look at recording as this: cars being built. That's the recording. Mixing is like the paint, the seat colors, the style of the interior, all that being put together. The mastering is like the clear coat to give it the gloss and shine. That would probably be the best way I would describe recording, mixing, and then mastering. So Troy says, I'm getting the Need 273. Thanks a bunch. So the Need 1073 is a really good preamp. It's very, very popular. It says, Alfred said, talking about preamps again, do you believe in getting a preamp channel strip or just a regular preamp? It varies. Some preamps, personally for me, if you can get a channel strip preamp, because it's going to give you, because most engineers don't just use the preamp by itself before they run into the DAW. This is the reason why sometimes a lot of people, when they just use the preamp going into their audio interface and into their DAW, is why sometimes it's lacking stuff, because audio engineers don't want you to know that they run a signal chain. They're going to run through 1176, maybe a Pultec EQ, then it's going to go into the recording. And that's what's going to fatten up and warm up the sound with the but so a channel strip, a lot of times when they have built-in EQs and compressors, they definitely help better with the sound than a preamp alone. Even though preamps can sound amazing, sometimes you just need the preamp and you don't want anything else to color the sound, like a compressor or whatever. But if you can, The great thing about a preamp with a channel strip is if you don't want to use the EQ or the compressor, you can always turn those off and just use the preamp. So if you can get the channel strip, go with the channel strip. That's how I would look at it. It says I totally do. Let me say I totally. Once you understand the whole front end recording process and you get a great mic and preamp combo, you would definitely change your mind. Okay, well, yeah, like I said, it just I don't know. Let me see. We're I don't know what the disagreement but is, but okay. That says, Mr. Which 1073 you go? He said the Neve, which is industry standard. What do you think about recorders versus DAWs like a Tascam Dp24? Recorders, like I have a DAW. I have a couple. I have the old 8ATs, and I also have the 8AT HD24. I really didn't need recording on the HD24, but as far as a DAW, my personally, I like DAWs because the editing capability. It's just you can edit. Let me, excuse me, I gotta take it. My throat's getting dry. Okay. I like DAWs specifically because you can do so much more editing capability with the DAW. So I prefer that. But hard disk recorders and ADAT stuff like that also have their advantages because they're also a fun way to record as well. They're just dated technology. So it's kind of like, will you ever, can you really edit like you can? No. Can you put in plugins with a recorder? No. So the Tascam Dp24, never worked on it. I believe it might have some EQ capability, maybe some compressor capability, not sure. Never worked on it. But it's also limited. I think it's only limited to 24 tracks. But I would definitely keep it as a backup because one thing about hard drives and computers, they do crash and get corrupted and break. So you can look at it like that. Keep it as a backup. You can, always get a session going in case something happened to the computer. And the good thing about it, having a hard disk recorder like that Tascam, is you can always dump what you record into the hard disk back into your computer at a later date if need be. Alfredo asked me, do you record your vocals going in with a compressor or not? For me, I do. I like to use compressor because, especially vocals, because some people, they belt, they get loud, and you got to control some of those peaks. So some compression, I don't use a ton of compression, but I do use some to control some of the dynamics. It's some, vocalists are just loud. Oh, no, I was replying to when I got you, Mr. Okay. What do you think about Behringer Ultra Curve as a mastering hardware? I don't see, the thing is, I don't think I've ever used the Ultra Curve on for mastering hardware. So I can't give an opinion on it. All I can say was Behringer Ultra Curve is that when I made a video about is Behringer any good, I put it like this. I don't like to bash any company because there are people that are going to bash Behringer, Clark Technic, whatever, Art. And the problem with that is when you got other people that are doing very well with the gear, then it makes the other people look like they're just being buttholes. It's really what it is. So you got one person say, I get great results with it. Other people said, no, that piece of gear suck. So I would say if you got an Ultra Curve and it works and it sounds good, then by all means. That's all I can say. If it doesn't work and you don't like it, you can always sell it. So it just depends. See, I'm gonna upload that beat. Okay, I think he's still continuing the conversation. Let's see, because the mixing part. Right, okay. I've said, do you really need a summing mixer? Only if you're going to play, if you plan on using outboard gear. If you plan on getting some external compressors, EQs, reverbs, or whatever. If you're just going to use your plugins, and plugins are getting better and better and better, it's like making a lot of the outboard gear a lot less attractive. And I'm not like, because I got a lot of outboard gear, but let me tell you what's great about a plugin compared to piece of outboard gear. You got one outboard piece of gear as an example. You can only use it once. You got to decide where you're going to use it. Are you going to use it on a channel, on an insert? Are you going to use it on a master bus? Or are you going to use it on one of the bus channels? And you can only use it once. That's the downside. The great thing about it is signal sounds good going through real electronics. That's the great thing about real gear compared to software emulations. Software emulations are emulations. But with a plugin, you can put that across as many channels as your computer can process. If your computer can only process 4 plugins, time to upgrade the computer. But if you can, you get away with as many plugins as you can across as many channels you can and many buses as you can, I would say go hybrid. Use a combination of the plugins and the hardware. Is what I do. Okay. So it says I see you have a lot of keyboards. I have one. Michael says, I see you have a lot of keyboards. If you can only have one to do everything, what would it be? I have 10 synthesizers, and that is a tough question because out of my 10 synthesizers, I'm not talking about my controllers, just my synthesizers. It's a toss-up between my Korg Triton Studio, my Korg Chrome, or my Yamaha Motif. That's a hard question because I use the Motif a lot. So I would probably say, because I have a lot of virtual sounds, with Analog Lab 5, Synth Anthology 3, and all that, I would probably, if I had to give up all those boards except for one, I would probably keep the Motif and just use all the other sounds coming virtual from internal the software. So that would probably be my number one. Second would be the Korg Chrome, then third would be the Korg Triton, and then of course the fourth would be the Roland Phantom. But that's what I would do. Let me see. Okay, what was the next question? It says, I was told by Sweetwater I need a summing mixer for mastering. Because Sweetwater, you think about this. Let's when you talk to places like Sweetwater, well, Sweetwater's not going to make as much money trying to sell you plugins like they would with hardware. So if you tell them, well, I want to do some mastering, well, they're going to recommend a Manley passive EQ, a Shadow Hills mastering, a Manley EQ, another piece. They're going to recommend at least 5 to 6 or 8, 10 pieces of hardware. So you can go into your mastering software, and then you're going to sum out of that hardware into one of those pieces of unit, then back into for your mastering. When you probably can, and some people can do an excellent job just mastering with T-Rax. It's just, they don't want to hear that because T-Rax is going to cost you what, $159? Or you get their studio suite for $499 and get every single plugin and amp emulator and virtual synth off the planet for $499 or whatever the case. Of course, they're going to tell you you need a summing mixer. The thing is, the question for you should say, well, do I want to use outboard gear to do my mastering, or can I just get away with plugins? If you're going to do mastering, I would say get you a very powerful Mac, at least 32 to 64 gigs of RAM, or a very powerful PC, 32 gigs of RAM or whatever, 16, 32 gigs of RAM. It's a very powerful processing. Try with the plugins first before you start buying $3,000 because if you look at the prices of the gear that Sweetwater sells, the mastering the gear they're going to recommend you buy, you're talking $3,000, $4,000, $6,000 a unit. And then, they can make 20, 30 grand off of you trying to buy mastering. And that's not including like Dyne audio speakers or PCM audio or, speakers that you're going to use for the listening room and the acoustics you're going to buy. That's just buying the desk and all that. So you think about that for a second. When you do ask questions for your sources, think about the source you're asking the question. It's like asking an audio engineering school, do you really think I need an audio engineering school? You think they're going to tell you no? They're going to tell you, oh, you definitely need us if you want to learn. And I'm going to tell you no. Okay. Now, some mixes at 2,000 at least, I would tell you that too. Right? I just say, and believe it or not, a semi mixer, if you think about it, and I've told this people before, I can use this 48 channel Allen and Heath as a semi mixer. I don't need to use the EQ. I can just turn the EQ off. I don't really need to use I can use the auxiliary sends and the buses if I want to route gear to it. But I can turn the EQs off and and whatever the case, and bypass the preamps or whatever. And I can sum through it. And you could probably pick up something like this. I don't know, $500 to $1,000 on eBay or Reverb or whatever. You can buy mixers that do the job well without breaking the bank if you're just going to use it to sum, because you're just going to sum your, whatever whether a 2-track stereo mass, track or whatever, you're just going to sum through it and apply outboard gear. Other than that, you can do everything in the box. Let's see. AJ, I just turned some knob. I've tried. So I got lost with the conversation because I think they were conversing between each other. Add some random stuff. Let's see. That was what I was calling. Okay. Listen, I know a little of these guys personally, and I just don't see that. Oh, okay. Oh, I don't know if you're talking about the from Sweetwater. Okay. I really want the SSL Fusion. I've seen that. I heard it's really great. It's a little pricey. I would like to know how. There's a really great master engineer loves the SSL Fusion. So George Thompson says, once you go analog with mastering, everything matters. You got to account for conversion, etc. True. George says cables quality. Cables matter. Okay, let me see. That board probably sounds really good. I don't know if you're talking about the Allen Heath. Yeah, I like it. If you're talking about the Allen Heath, I like it. So you don't need a summy mixer to master. Like I said, you don't really, unless you plan on using some outboard gear, you don't need a summy mixer. You can do everything within the box. You don't even need it to mix. So you can do everything in the box. Most of the time in today's, we're grabbing plugins anyway, first, anyway. You can do that in your DAW, right? Yeah, definitely you can do, yeah, I mean, your DAW has a mixer in it. So, okay. It says, summon your DAW every time you mix down. Unless your DAW, yeah, you can summon, unless your DAW, every DAW has the ability to send routing based on the outputs of your interface. So if your interface, like the envelope I got, has 32 outputs, you can actually sum each individual output out of its own output of the interface. A lot of interfaces don't do that. Some interfaces only come with 2 or 4 outputs. So it's going to have just a basically, it's basically going to sum to the master for the most part. And some have actual monitor outputs as well, but that's designed for the speakers. So let me see. So Mark, how do you like your envelope? That thing is amazing. It just, yeah, yes. That's all I can tell you on that. Yes. But what's great about it is I like the flex because it has all the input and output. It's not just limited to like 2 or 4 or 6 or even 8 inputs. It's 32 inputs. So that's what's great about it. I've got 24 outputs, and they're all the outputs for my envelope are 1 through 24. So that's what's great about it. And Alfred, I think he's talking about mixing the box compared to using outboard gear and real mixer and all that. And I think he said when you're using plugins and all that, he's saying true, but nothing like pushing buttons to turn off. That's why I have gear. I love plugins and they're fun to work in, but it's when you're touching a real knob and turning a real knob, it's just, you know. He said, he wants to know, are MIDI packs overrated? Are you talking about like something like Unison MIDI pack? Because I'm a musician and I know how to build every single chord and every single key, and I know how to build whether it's a triad chord, a 7th chord, 9th chord, 11th chord, 13th chord, and I know how every single progression. They're extremely overrated because it's like they said, well, all you gotta do is drag and drop into your interface and use this MIDI pack. And I get that for people that may not know any music or music theory, but I'm like, you can learn music. If you dedicate yourself, you can learn music. All you need a few weeks, and then everything else is just practice. You can learn the basics of music in a few weeks. I can teach someone theory in a day. Everything else, you just got to apply it because you're not going to remember everything I teach you. You're going to have to apply it because it's going to be overwhelming. But you think of a progression, and I'll talk about progressions for a quick second. You take 1 through 7 on let's say use a keyboard example. You know, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, right? Because do is the same as do, it's just difference in octaves. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Well, 1 and the bass line of all music carries the progression, believe it or not. The bass line, because it's carrying the root of the chord structure of a progression. So if I go 1, 3, 6, 2, 5, well, there are certain chords that work over top of those numbers of progressions. Very, very simple. So if I learn what chords to use over those progressions, and I can also alter those chords from a minor, maybe a major, change it to an augmented, or change it to a diminished. That's what MIDI, that's what those kind of chord or those MIDI packs or whatever are doing. But most people don't know they're doing that. But when you understand and know music, I don't need you to tell me how to create a chord progression. I know how to create every chord progression known to man. And if I tried to do this before with videos, but I wasn't getting a lot of views on it. So I figured people just weren't interested in learning how to create music that way. Now, if people are interested in wanting to learn how to create every possible chord and progression and never be dependent on chord books and MIDI packs and stuff like that again, people got to let me know, and I'll start that back up again. But I tried to teach, and I wasn't getting any views. I think I did one and only got like 12 views and 1 like. That tell me people weren't interested. So, all right. It said, Mr. I've been using the same interface for over a year now. Oh, I think he's talking to someone else. Says, and there's nothing if he said I've been using MIDI packs. Are you hella MIDIs? Well, it's a choice. It's no different than, it's a choice. But personally, I like to create my own. That's just me. Says, as long as you understand the buttons you're pushing and the knobs you're turning, because trust me, it's very easy to screw up. I think we're still conversing. Okay. It says, as a producer, do you really need many keyboards to make music, or can I just use one keyboard synth to do it all? I'm gonna tell you like this, Alfredo, with the keyboards. Believe it or not, now with programs like Synth Anthology or Analog Lab 5 by Arturia and a controller, in that sense, that's all you need, because those programs are coming in 5,000-6,000 sounds. But if you're going to have a synthesizer, I think now the modern boards like the Yamaha Montage, the Chord Cronus, the new Roland Phantom, that run board is going to be all you need. Because in the end, you can have something like UVI Synth Anthology. What are the chances you're going to use all 4,000 sounds? Or you like me, I got VIP on this computer, and it's got, between Velvet, Loom, Expand, and all these other virtual sounds, 2,500 sounds there. What are the chances that I'm going to use half those sounds? Probably not. I'm going to use majority of my go-to sounds, like my Fender Rhodes or my Wurlitzer sounds. I'm going to use a lot of my string sounds, my common sounds, my brass sounds, guitar sounds, bass sounds. Or I'm going to use, the sample packs that come in like MP, and then this MPC program. That's just so, and that's probably narrowed down to maybe max 300 to 400 sounds max in every song I'll ever record. That's just me. I think that you probably can get away with just one keyboard altogether. I think that, all right. So I've been live streaming for an hour and 17 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and end the live stream, because this will load up to YouTube. And then, of course, I don't want, you know how to go when you live stream for 2 or 3 hours. You know how that goes. So I do want to thank El and Michael and Alfredo and AY, I think it's AYJP 2022. And all of y'all for tuning into the live stream. I haven't done this in a while. I was just going to talk about audio and recording, but I'm glad y'all brought your questions, because it kept it going. Before I go, many keyboards make a studio look legit. It can, just like a lot of gear, but you can. What I'll say on that, I've seen one case where this one person, they knew nothing about. They had a lot. They were a baller. This is a true story. They bought an API console, all the top of line gear, mics, everything, and knew absolutely nothing about recording in studio. And they were looking for engineers, and that's how they got away with it. So sometimes it's more about what the person knows than the gear they have. So, but once again, I want to thank all of y'all for tuning in. Thanks, L. Thanks, AYJP. Thanks, Mr. and George and everyone that tuned in. I'm gonna try to do this every and Michael, and I'm gonna try to tune in. I'm gonna try to do this weekly, and we just live chat. We'll just chat, So I really do appreciate y'all tuning in, and we're gonna do this again next week, and I really do appreciate y'all supporting the channel, and we thank y'all. And I hope everyone well, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for y'all time.